The views and opinions expressed in The Fact Is with Hollis Grant are those of Hollis Grant and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Droids Canada Network. Droids Canada Network does not take responsibility for any content or position produced by Hollis Grant and his show. Listener discretion is advised.
Using pronouns would be forcing people to have a language police. But we're going to take a look at the bill and what's happened since that it's been put into law. Now, I'll read from the bill, partly of the bill, of course. Now, it comes down to the Canadian Human Rights Act. So, Section 2 of the Canadian Human Rights Act is replaced by the following. So, purpose. The purpose of the Act is to extend the laws in Canada to give effect within the purview of matters coming within the legislative authority of Parliament to the principle that all individuals should have an opportunity equal with other individuals to make themselves the lives that they are able to and wish to have their needs accommodated consistent with their duties and obligations as members of society without being hindered or prevented from doing so by discriminatory practices based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, age, sex, sexual orientation, and the addition was gender identity or expression, marital status, family status, disability, or conviction of an offense for which a pardon has been granted or in respect of which a record suspension has been ordered. Now, on the surface, it all sounds fine, and everyone can agree with that. That's fine. However you want to identify is however you want to identify, and if you want to do certain things, then go right ahead and do that. You can't discriminate, so if somebody came to you and said that I'm going to be a mermaid and going to apply for the job and says I'm a mermaid, you can't not hire them based on discrimination of them being a mermaid. But what you can do is you can look at them and go, chances are they're a complete nut job. And you could say this, I don't want this person to represent the company that I work for. But getting into the criminal code aspect, subsection 318.4 of the criminal code is replaced by the following definition of an identifiable group. In this section, identifiable group means any section of the public distinguished by color, race, religion, national or ethnic origin, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, or mental or physical disability. So to get into it, subsection 718.2 of the Act is replaced by the following evidence that the offense was motivated by bias, prejudice, or hate based on race, national or ethnic origin, language, color, religion, sex, age, mental or physical disability, sexual orientation, or gender identity or expression, or on any other similar factor. Now, where it gets tricky and where the conversation comes down to is how do you handle these pronouns? How do you handle using pronouns? And if you're a person that's going to use pronouns, how do you prove that there was hatred for not using a pronoun? Somebody taking a stance to say, no, I won't use that. I choose not to use that language. That's not hate, because you could simply say, I choose not to use pronouns for any individual. I refer to people by their first names and how they want to be called. Yes, I understand your argument is to say, well, the person wants to be called their pronoun, but the individual themselves has a name, and that name is what one would choose to use in a regular sentence. See, pronouns make sense and they formulate sentences and easier to communicate. For example, if you're having a conversation to say, I have a coffee cup, well, the pronoun of I, it belongs to me. But you don't necessarily see these pronouns when you're looking at the online sphere. Companies, large banks have started to force employees or suggest to employees to put their gender pronouns in their emails. And if you notice those emails, they all say he or his or her or she. Now, those pronouns wouldn't make sense in any other way to communicate, especially when you're dealing with an individual face to face or through email to email. Now, for example, if you're writing an email to somebody, and we'll just use an example of purchasing some supplies from an online store, and you would say good morning, and you could say either sir, madam, you could use a pronoun, but you don't necessarily say or never would say good morning she or good morning he. You would say good morning and the person's name, or you would just say simple salutation of good morning. Your email would go on to say I would like to, and you could say I, because if you're ordering, I would like to order the following, and you would list out with what you would need, and you would normally sign it. Please send to the address. Thank you very much. Here's my billing information. Here's my payment information. Now, if you're going to get an email back from the company to say good morning, and they would usually use your name, because they're not going to say good morning she. That doesn't make sense. They wouldn't say good morning he. They wouldn't say good morning z, zip, zer, zoop. So they would say good morning. Thank you very much for the order. Or you could even say your order. That's a pronoun. But you would say the order because it is an order. And you would say, well, the item that you ordered, unfortunately, is not available. It's been back ordered and it will be available in 3 weeks. Would you like a replacement? Or would you like to remove the item for the order? Now, if you notice, it's saying you as an individual. Now, getting into the pronouns and the pronoun please, if we're looking at social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, if you've noticed, the pronouns are always, again, are he, him, or z, or zer, or she's. There's many to choose from, and the jokes can be made about how many pronouns there are, and they're constantly evolving and constantly being added. But if you notice, those pronouns are only for when the individual is not in the room or not privy to the conversation. Because you wouldn't say you or your or I, because you're speaking about yourself to somebody in that moment. These pronouns are designed to bend reality when the individual is not in the room or is not part of the conversation. For example, if I'm speaking to you, the listener, and to say, we'll take John over there. Now, John's not in the room. John likes to have his pronouns called as Zer. And I'm going to say to you, well, did you see John the other day? He was going to the library. I saw him in his new car. It really looks nice, doesn't it? John's not going to know about this conversation that I'm having with you because John's not here. Because if John was here, and now let's redo the conversation, and now there's 3 of us, we would say, hey, John, I saw your new car. It's a very nice car. You were going to the library, weren't you? And John would simply carry on the conversation because now I'm directly talking to him. These pronouns are designed, once again, to control speech and a person's perception of reality when they're not even in the present space or field. So by listing the pronouns in your online profile, doesn't serve a purpose, because those pronouns that you're using as an individual would have no bearing on any conversation that someone's having to you as an individual. Because the most common thing that people will refer to you as an individual by is your name. Your name is the most important. Because when I'm introduced to somebody, you say their name, say, "Hi, Bob, it's really nice to meet you. So, Bob, tell me about yourself." Because the conversation is about you as an individual. It's about you. That you has not been changed and is not demanded to be changed in these conversations. These people that use their gender pronouns and place gender pronouns will never want to change the term you, because they're narcissists. They always want to be talked about. When you let narcissism run amok, this is what you have. Self-classification, turning into multiple groups of individuals to be catered to, and to have their reality forced upon others. So here at the show, we would love to hear your feedback and have you tell us how you feel about pronouns, and how do you like to be talked to in the first person, in a first person conversation, not in a third person. Reach out to us. We'd love to hear you. Reach out to us on the Facebook group, always through droidscanada.com, where you can go back and listen to our past episodes. You can reach us on Twitter as well. I'd like to thank you for tuning in to this edition of The Fact Is. I'm your host, Hollis Grant, and I hope you have yourself a great week. In the first person, in a first-person conversation, not in a third person. Reach out to us. We'd love to hear you. Reach out to us on the Facebook group, always through droidscanada.com, where you can go back and listen to our past episodes. You can reach us on Twitter as well. I'd like to thank you for tuning in to this edition of The Fact Is. I'm your host, Hollis Grant, and I hope you have yourself a great week.
Dun, 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 dun. Salsa shark! We're gonna need a bigger boat!
Throughout history, they have been a part of our Canadian life. Men and women who have made their mission to entertain their fellow man. They've worked hard enough. Isn't it time they had their own podcast?
Droids Canada. This podcast would be great if it wasn't for the internet trolls.
I don't bother them, and they don't bother me.
I could do without the bad reviews in the iTunes store.
You have that podcast with that guy who was at that Comic-Con in the last year?
You should hear the barrage of the stupid questions I get on our SoundCloud account. What do you mean there was coughing? How am I going to hear a podcast with coughing?
You feel a lot better if you just rip into the occasional guest.
You're a host who doesn't get paid. You can't just do anything you want while you're recording.
What kind of podcast are you running here anyways?
Droids Canada Podcast present.
You think anyone can see us down here?
Why, you think you want to have sex or something?
Can we?
Droids Canada Podcast. The only show to rip off a Clerks trailer.
You hate people!
But I love Comic-Cons. Isn't it ironic?